The explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence of Forward Operating Base Kestrel, sending Maya Rodriguez diving behind the industrial freezer as chunks of concrete rained down from the ceiling. Her chef's whites were instantly gray with dust, but her hands remained steady as she reached for the Glock 19 hidden beneath the prep table. "Contact north wall." Someone screamed over the base intercom, but Maya was already moving, muscle memory overriding the carefully constructed persona she'd maintained for 8 months. She sprinted toward the mess hall's rear exit, her practiced eyes cataloging every detail: 3 distinct explosion signatures, coordinated timing, professional placement. This wasn't random insurgent harassment. This was a targeted breach. The second blast came as she reached the door, closer this time, taking out the generator room. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in hellish red shadows. Through the reinforced window, she could see muzzle flashes lighting up the perimeter like deadly fireflies. Maya's fingers found the hidden panel behind the fire extinguisher, retrieving the encrypted radio she wasn't supposed to have. "Mongoose to Overwatch," she whispered into the device, using call signs that belonged to a world these soldiers never knew existed. "Cover blown. Initiating blackout protocol." The response crackled back immediately. "Negative, Mongoose. Mission. Parameters unchanged. Maintain cover at all costs." She stared at the radio in disbelief. Outside, automatic weapons fire was getting closer. She could hear boots running past the mess hall, shouted orders in Pashto growing louder. And command wanted her to keep pretending to be just the cook. "Overwatch, be advised hostile forces are inside the wire. Repeat, we have a major breach. I count at least 12 tangos with RPGs, and, Mongoose, you will maintain your cover identity. That is a direct order. Find somewhere to hide and wait for extraction." Maya clicked off the radio and shoved it back into its hiding place. 8 months of serving scrambled eggs and listening to these boys joke about the cute little cook who couldn't hurt a fly. 8 months of biting her tongue when they talked about tactics she could execute in her sleep. 8 months of being invisible while she gathered intelligence on the Taliban cell that had been feeding information to insurgents across 3 provinces. The mess hall door burst open, and Sergeant Tommy Chun stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Maya, thank God you're okay. We need to get you to the bunker." His words died as he saw her stance, the way she was positioned with perfect cover behind the serving counter. Every muscle coiled for action. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and Tommy saw something that made his eyes widen. "Who are you?" he whispered. Before Maya could answer, the far wall exploded inward. Maya Rodriguez wiped flour from her hands and surveyed the organized chaos of her kitchen domain. The mess hall at Forward Operating Base Kestrel wasn't exactly the Ritz, but she'd transformed the utilitarian space into something that felt almost homey. Colorful spice containers lined the shelves she'd installed herself, and the aroma of her grandmother's carnitas recipe filled the air, masking the perpetual smell of diesel fuel and dust that permeated everything in this corner of Afghanistan. "Smells incredible in here, as always," said Captain James Morrison, the base commander, as he entered for his daily rounds. He was a good man, Maya had decided during her months here, competent, fair to his troops, and genuinely concerned about morale. She almost felt guilty for lying to him. "Just trying to remind the boys what they're fighting for, sir," she replied with the shy smile that had become second nature. "My abuela always said that a good meal can cure anything except a broken heart." Morrison chuckled, helping himself to coffee from the pot she kept perpetually brewing. "Well, you've certainly improved morale around here. Requests for extended deployments are up 20% since you arrived. That's got to be some kind of record." Maya ducked her head, playing up the modest act. In reality, she knew exactly why morale had improved. It wasn't just the food. It was the sense of normalcy she brought, the way she remembered everyone's preferences, asked about their families, created a space where they could pretend, for 30 minutes at mealtime, that they weren't in a combat zone. It was also excellent cover. No one suspected the unassuming woman who fussed over whether they were eating enough vegetables of being anything more than what she appeared. "Any word on those supply deliveries?" she asked, wiping down the counter. "I'm running low on decent meat, and these boys need their protein. Should be here by Friday. Sorry for the delay. Logistics is always a nightmare out here." Morrison paused, studying her with the kind of attention that made Maya's training kick into high alert mode, even as she maintained her innocent expression. "You know, Maya, I've been meaning to ask, what made you want to come out here? Most civilian contractors stick to the bigger, safer bases." She'd been expecting this question for months. Her cover story was solid: recently divorced, no kids, needed the money and the adventure. But Morrison was sharper than most, and she could see him trying to puzzle out what didn't quite fit. "Honestly, Captain, I was tired of cooking for people who didn't appreciate it. Here, when I make someone's favorite meal, I can see it in their faces, real joy, you know? Like I'm giving them a piece of home." She gestured toward the dining area, where several soldiers were already gathering for the lunch rush. "Back in Colorado, I was just another short-order cook. Here, I don't know, I matter." It wasn't entirely a lie. Maya did find satisfaction in the genuine gratitude of the troops, even if her real mission was far more complex than feeding them. Morrison nodded, seeming satisfied. "Well, we're lucky to have you. I know the men appreciate." An alarm started blaring, cutting him off mid-sentence. Not the attack alarm. Maya had memorized every alert system on the base, but the one that meant incoming helicopter. "That's weird," Morrison frowned, checking his watch. "We're not expecting any flights today." Through the mess hall windows, Maya could see a Black Hawk approaching fast and low. Her trained eye immediately cataloged details that would mean nothing to most observers: the non-standard rotor configuration, the subtle antenna modifications, the way it moved with the aggressive precision of a special operations aircraft. Her blood went cold. Black SOF birds only came here for two reasons: high-value target extraction or blown cover retrieval. And she hadn't called for extraction. "Excuse me, Captain. I should get lunch ready for whoever's arriving." Maya retreated to her kitchen, her mind racing. In her 8 months at FOB Kestrel, she'd been building a comprehensive intelligence picture of Taliban operations in the region. Her reports had identified key players, supply routes, and communication networks. The information she'd gathered was invaluable, too valuable for command to risk losing to an early extraction. So why was a black helicopter landing at her base? Through the serving window, she watched Morrison stride out to meet the aircraft. The soldiers who disembarked weren't regular army. She could tell by their gear, their bearing, the way they moved with the fluid confidence of Tier 1 operators. Her mouth went dry as she recognized the unit patches: 5th Special Forces Group, green berets, and they were talking to Morrison, gesturing toward the mess hall. Toward her, Maya forced her breathing to stay calm and started prepping vegetables with mechanical precision. Whatever was happening, she needed to maintain her cover until she could get to her secure communications and find out what the hell was going on. One of the green berets entered the mess hall, a staff sergeant with intelligent eyes and the kind of alert stillness that marked him as seriously dangerous. He looked around the space, his gaze lingering on details that most people would miss: the sight lines, the exits, the defensive positions. "Ma'am, you must be Maya Rodriguez." "That's right." She kept her voice light and curious, the way any civilian contractor would respond to unexpected military attention. "Can I get you something to eat? I've got some excellent. Actually, ma'am, we need to talk. Could you step outside for a moment?" Maya's heart hammered, but she maintained her persona. "Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong?" No, ma'am. Just routine questions. Nothing about this was routine. As she followed him outside, Maya caught a glimpse of Morrison deep in conversation with what appeared to be the team leader. The captain looked confused and increasingly concerned. The staff sergeant led her to a spot away from the main foot traffic, near the motor pool where the noise of generators would cover their conversation. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them truthfully. Lives depend on it. Okay, yes, of course. How well do you know your supply delivery drivers? The question caught her off guard. She'd been expecting something about her background, her credentials, maybe even pointed questions about her real identity. But supply drivers? Not very well, she answered honestly. They come twice a week, usually different guys each time. I just checked the manifests and signed for delivery. Why? The Green Beret studied her face with the intensity of someone trained to detect deception. We have reason to believe one of your regular suppliers has been compromised. Someone's been using food deliveries to pass information to insurgent cells. Maya felt the pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. You think there's a spy at the base. We think someone with access to meal schedules, personnel counts, and supply inventories has been feeding intelligence to the enemy. The pattern of attacks on convoys and patrols correlates directly with information that would be available through the mess hall operations. She stared at him, letting genuine shock show on her face because it wasn't entirely an act. If there really was a leak through the mess operations, it could compromise not just the base security, but her entire mission. The Taliban cell she was tracking would have access to her movements, her schedule, maybe even her real identity. Sergeant, I can give you everything I have: delivery records, schedules, personnel files for anyone who's had access to the kitchen. But I have to ask ... Am I under suspicion? The Green Beret's expression softened slightly. Right now, everyone with access is under suspicion. But between you and me, you're pretty low on the list. Your security clearance came back clean, and your background check was solid. Plus, the intel leak started about 3 months before you arrived. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by professional concern. If there was a real security breach, it could explain some of the anomalies she'd noticed in Taliban movement patterns. What she'd attributed to increased operational security on their part might actually be the result of inside information. What can I do to help? For now, just keep doing what you've been doing. Don't change your routine. Don't act suspicious. We'll be conducting interviews with all personnel over the next few days. If you notice anything unusual, anyone asking strange questions, unexpected interest in your operations, you report it immediately. Maya nodded, projecting the kind of nervous cooperation any innocent person would show. Should I be worried about my safety? We'll have additional security measures in place. But Ms. Rodriguez, I want to be clear about something. The staff sergeant stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that wouldn't carry beyond her ears. If you are involved in this, if you're playing some kind of game, people will die. Good people. Think very carefully about whether there's anything you need to tell me. She met his gaze steadily. Sergeant, I swear to you, I want to catch whoever's doing this as much as you do. These soldiers ... they're good kids. They deserve better than being betrayed by someone they trust. It was the truth, just not the complete truth. She did want to catch the spy, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because it was interfering with her mission. The Taliban cell she was tracking had been more cautious lately, their communications more encrypted, their meetings more sporadic. If they suspected counterintelligence operations, they might shut down entirely or relocate beyond her reach. The Green Beret studied her for another long moment, then nodded. Okay. Thank you for your cooperation. And remember routine as normal. But stay alert. As he walked away, Maya returned to her kitchen with her mind churning. She had 2 problems now: maintaining her cover while there was active counterintelligence scrutiny, and figuring out who was compromising base security before. They either got her killed or destroyed 8 months of painstaking intelligence work. She also had an opportunity. If she could identify the real spy, it would not only protect her mission, but potentially give her additional credibility with base personnel. The more trusted she became, the more access she'd have to the kind of informal intelligence that formal channels missed. Maya began preparing lunch with renewed focus, her trained mind cataloging every person who had access to her kitchen, every conversation she'd overheard, every anomaly she'd dismissed as unimportant. Somewhere in the daily routine of FOB Kestrel was a traitor, and she was going to find them. What she didn't know was that the traitor was already watching her, had been watching her for weeks, and was starting to suspect that the unassuming cook wasn't quite what she seemed. The next 72 hours transformed FOB Kestrel from a relaxed outpost into something resembling a high-security prison. The Green Berets conducted interviews in the base commander's office, and Maya could see the stress building in the faces of soldiers who were used to trusting their brothers in arms without question. Maya maintained her routine with meticulous care, but underneath her calm exterior, she was conducting her own investigation. Every meal service became an opportunity to observe, to listen, to catalog behavior patterns that might reveal deception. "Hey Maya, you okay?" Corporal Lisa Wong settled into her usual spot at the counter, picking at her scrambled eggs. Lisa was one of the communications specialists, a sharp young woman from San Francisco who'd been one of the first to welcome Maya to the base. "You seem, I don't know, distracted lately." "Just worried about all this spy business," Maya replied. Which was completely true. "It's scary thinking someone might be watching everything we do." Lisa nodded, but Maya noticed she didn't quite meet her eyes. It was a subtle tell, the kind of thing most people would miss, but Maya had been trained to read micro-expressions and body language. Lisa was nervous about something beyond the general anxiety that had gripped the base. "I'm sure they'll catch whoever it is," Lisa said, but her voice carried a forced note of confidence. "Those Green Berets look like they know what they're doing." Maya filed the observation away and moved on to serving the next soldier in line. Over the past 3 days, she'd noticed similar subtle signs in 4 other base personnel. Sergeant Rick Torres from the motor pool, who'd been asking unusually detailed questions about delivery schedules. Private Jennifer Knox from supply, who'd been spending a lot of time near the kitchen during off-duty hours. Lieutenant Marcus Webb from intelligence, who'd been paying more attention to Maya's interactions with delivery drivers than seemed warranted. And Staff Sergeant Brian Phillips from security, who'd been notably absent from his usual meals. Any one of these behavioral changes could be explained by the general tension, but Maya's instincts were telling her to dig deeper. Her opportunity came that afternoon when she volunteered to help inventory supplies in preparation for the next delivery. It gave her legitimate access to areas of the base she normally wouldn't visit, and legitimate reasons to ask questions. "This is really helpful, Maya," said Private Knox as they counted MRE cases in the supply warehouse. "I've been so behind on these inventories since all this security stuff started." "No problem. I like to know what we're working with anyway." Maya made notes on her clipboard, but she was really studying Knox's demeanor. The young soldier seemed genuinely grateful for the help, but there was an underlying tension that set off Maya's internal alarms. "Jenny, can I ask you something?" Maya kept her voice casual, conspiratorial. "Have you noticed anything weird about the delivery guys lately? The Green Berets asked me about them, but honestly, I don't pay much attention to anyone who's not bringing me good ingredients." Knox's reaction was subtle, but telling, a slight tightening around her eyes, a momentary pause in her counting. "Not really. I mean, they're all pretty much the same. Local contractors, mostly Afghan guys who don't speak much English." "Right, I just wondered because that one guy, the tall one with the scar on his hand, he seemed to be asking a lot of questions last week." Wanted to know about our meal schedules, how many people we feed each day. I figured it was just small talk, but now Maya was lying. There was no scarred delivery driver. She was testing Knox's reaction to fictional information, a classic intelligence technique for identifying deception. Knox relaxed visibly. Oh, him. Yeah, he's always been chatty. I wouldn't worry about it. He's been making deliveries here for over a year. Bingo. Knox had just confirmed knowledge of a person who didn't exist, which meant either she was lying to cover something, or she was involved in whatever information was being leaked. Maya kept her expression neutral while her mind raced through the implications. That's a relief. I was starting to get paranoid about everyone. She returned to counting supplies, but she was really studying Knox more carefully. The private was young, maybe 22, from a small town in Ohio. Her personnel file had been clean, but personnel files only told part of the story. They worked. In comfortable silence for a few more minutes before Maya tried another probe. This whole thing must be especially hard on you communications people. I mean, if someone's really passing information, they'd probably need access to radio schedules and stuff like that, right? Knox's hand stilled on the supply crate she was examining. Yeah, it's been stressful. Everyone's looking at us sideways, you know? Like we're automatically suspects because we handle information flow. That's not fair. I'm sure they know the difference between doing your job and being a traitor. I hope so. Knox's voice was barely above a whisper. Maya, what would you do if you found out someone you trusted was doing something really bad? Something that could get people hurt? Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice gentle and supportive. That's a hard question. I guess I'd want to understand why they were doing it before I decided what to do about it. But what if understanding it didn't make it okay? What if they had reasons that seemed good to them, but it was still wrong? This was it. Knox was either confessing or testing Maya's trustworthiness. Either way, Maya needed to handle it carefully. Jenny, are you okay? You seem really upset about something. Knox looked around the warehouse, confirming they were alone. Then moved closer to Maya. Can I tell you something? In complete confidence? Of course. I think I know who's been passing information. But I can't prove it, and I'm scared of what might happen if I'm wrong. Maya's mind raced. This could be Knox deflecting suspicion onto someone else, or it could be genuine intelligence. Either way, she needed to hear it. Who do you think it is? Knox glanced around again, then whispered a name that made Maya's blood run cold. Staff Sergeant Phillips, from security. Brian Phillips was one of the soldiers Maya had flagged for suspicious behavior. But more than that, he was someone with access to nearly every aspect of base operations. If Phillips was the leak, he could have been monitoring Maya's activities for months. Why do you think it's him? He's been asking weird questions about delivery schedules and asking to see communications. Logs that aren't really his business. And last week, I saw him taking photos of something with his personal phone in the comm center. When I asked him about it, he said he was documenting equipment for maintenance, but double quote. But I checked with maintenance. They never requested any photos. Maya nodded slowly, processing the information. Have you told anyone else about this? I was going to tell those green berets, but Phillips heard I was scheduled for an interview tomorrow, and he pulled me aside. Said he was worried I might accidentally say something that would compromise base security, that I should be really careful about what I told them. Knox's voice was shaking now. Maya, he scared me. Not like he threatened me or anything, but the way he looked at me. Like he was trying to figure out what I knew. This was getting dangerous fast. If Phillips really was the spy, and he suspected Knox was onto him, both women could be in serious trouble. Jenny, listen to me. You need to tell the Green Berets everything you just told me, okay? Don't wait for your scheduled interview. Go find them right now. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid and I ruin Phillips's career? Then you'll apologize and deal with the consequences. But what if you're right and someone gets killed because you didn't speak up? Knox nodded, but Maya could. See, she was still terrified. Will you come with me? I don't think I can do this alone. Maya hesitated. Getting involved would draw attention to herself, but leaving Knox to handle this alone could be disastrous. If Phillips really was the spy, and he realized Knox was talking, he might do something desperate. Of course. Let me just finish this inventory sheet so we don't look suspicious. As Maya scribbled notes on her clipboard, her mind was working through contingencies. If Phillips was the leak, her mission could be compromised in ways she hadn't even considered. But it also presented an opportunity. Catching a real spy would give her significant credibility and potentially access to information she couldn't get any other way. They finished the inventory quickly and headed across the base toward the command building where the Green Berets had set up their operation. Maya found herself automatically scanning for Phillips, checking sightlines and escape routes, her Delta Force training asserting itself despite her efforts to maintain her cover persona. They were halfway across the compound when Maya spotted him, Staff Sergeant Phillips, emerging from the communications building. Looking around with the kind of heightened awareness that suggested he knew he was under scrutiny, their eyes met across the dusty courtyard, and Maya felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Phillips's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his gaze that made her training scream warnings. He started walking toward them. "Jenny," Maya said quietly, "keep walking, don't look back. We need to get to those Green Berets right now." But as they approached the command building, Maya realized with growing alarm that Phillips wasn't the only person watching them. Two other soldiers she didn't recognize had taken positions that would allow them to intercept anyone entering or leaving the building. The spy hunt was about to become something much more dangerous. "Ms. Rodriguez, Private Knox, could you step in here, please?" Staff Sergeant Morrison, the Green Beret she'd spoken with earlier, appeared in the doorway of the command building as if he'd been watching for them. His expression was alert and professional, but Maya caught the subtle hand signal he gave to someone behind him. They were expected. As Maya and Knox entered the building, Maya's trained awareness cataloged everything: 2 additional Green Berets positioned to control the room, communications equipment that hadn't been there during her last visit, and most importantly, the tension that practically radiated from everyone present. "Sir," Knox began, her voice shaking, "I need to report something." "I think Staff Sergeant Phillips—" "We know," Morrison interrupted gently. "Private, what I'm about to tell you is classified, and I need you to understand that lives depend on your discretion." Knox nodded nervously while Maya kept her expression neutral despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "We've been monitoring Staff Sergeant Phillips for the past week. Your suspicions were correct. He's been photographing classified documents and passing information to insurgent contacts through the supply chain." Maya felt a mix of relief and concern. Relief that Knox hadn't been making accusations against an innocent man, concern about what this meant for her own mission security. "But here's what complicates things," Morrison continued. "Phillips isn't working alone, and we believe he's been compromised rather than recruited. Someone has leverage on him, probably threats against his family back home." This was a common tactic, Maya knew. Insurgent groups would identify vulnerable personnel and use coercion rather than ideological conversion to create assets. It was often more reliable than trying to find true believers. "Sir, what do you need us to do?" Knox asked. Morrison looked between them, and Maya could see him weighing his words carefully. "Private Knox, you're going to continue your normal duties, but you'll be wearing a wire. If Phillips approaches you again, we need to document exactly what he says and how he says it." "And me?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is where things get complicated. Phillips has been paying unusual attention to your kitchen operations. We think he might Suspect you've noticed something." Maya's blood went cold. If Phillips suspected her of being aware of his activities, it could mean her cover was blown, or worse, that he'd identified her as something more than just a cook. What kind of attention? He's been asking questions about your delivery schedules, your interactions with drivers, even your personal background. That could be routine intelligence gathering for his handlers, or ... Or he thinks I'm a threat, Maya finished. We need to find out which, and we need you to help us do it. Maya knew she should refuse. Getting actively involved in a counterintelligence operation while maintaining deep cover was exactly the kind of risk that could compromise everything. But she also knew that Phillips's activities might already have compromised her, and the only way to know for sure was to get closer to the situation. What did you have in mind? Morrison exchanged glances with his teammates before answering. We want you to approach Phillips. Tell him you're worried about the investigation, that you're concerned you might have seen something suspicious without realizing it. See how he reacts. It was a dangerous play, but Maya could see the logic. If Phillips was just gathering intelligence about kitchen operations, he'd probably try to reassure her and gather more information. If he suspected she was more than she appeared, his reaction would be very different. When? Tonight. There's a poker game in the rec building after chow. Phillips usually attends. It'll give you a natural opportunity to approach him in a social setting. Maya nodded, but internally she was already planning contingencies. If Phillips reacted badly to her approach, she might need to break cover to protect herself and the mission. And if that happened, 8 months of careful intelligence gathering could be compromised. There's something else, Morrison added. We have reason to believe Phillips isn't the only compromised asset on the base. Someone higher up the chain has been feeding information about our investigation to his handlers. This was getting worse by the minute. A spy network was exponentially more dangerous than a single compromised soldier, especially when it included someone with command authority. Do you have any idea who? Not yet. That's part of why we need to approach this carefully. If Phillips realizes we're onto him before we identify his contacts, they could disappear or escalate to direct action against the base. Maya understood the implications. If the spy network felt cornered, they might facilitate a direct attack on FOB Kestrel rather than risk exposure. With her real identity and mission at stake, she was walking into a situation where multiple intelligence operations were converging with potentially lethal consequences. I'll do it, she said, projecting the kind of nervous determination any patriotic civilian would show. These soldiers trust me. If someone's betraying that trust, I want to help stop them. Morrison smiled, and Maya could see genuine respect in his expression. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Your country won't forget your service. If only he knew, Maya thought, exactly how long she'd been serving her country and in what capacity. As they left the command building, Knox grabbed Maya's arm. Are you sure about this? It sounds really dangerous. Someone has to do it, Maya replied. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I'm just the cook. But as they walked back across the base, Maya's trained instincts were screaming warnings. Staff Sergeant Phillips was standing near the motor pool, ostensibly checking vehicles but actually watching their route from the command building, and he wasn't the only one. Maya identified at least 3 other personnel who were positioned to observe their movements, none of whom had any obvious reason to be where they were. The spy network was bigger than the Green Berets suspected, and Maya was walking into the middle of it with nothing but her cover identity and whatever weapons she could access without blowing her mission. For the first time in 8 months, she found herself genuinely missing her Delta Force team and the kind of overwhelming firepower that made these situations much more straightforward. But tonight, she was just Maya Rodriguez, the cook who was about to find out exactly how dangerous her kitchen had become. The rec building at FOB Kestrel had the tired, comfortable atmosphere of a VFW hall back home. mismatched furniture donated by various units, a big screen TV that got 3 channels on a good day, and the perpetual smell of coffee and cigarettes that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. Tonight, it was hosting the weekly poker game that had become a tradition among the base's senior NCOs. Maya approached the building with a casserole dish in her hands, and nervous energy thrumming through her system. The casserole was her excuse. For being there, she'd made extra enchiladas and thought the boys might appreciate a late-night snack. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful gesture the soldiers had come to expect from their motherly cook. "Well, look what we have here," called out Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, no relation, despite the shared surname, as she entered. "Maya bringing us real food instead of those cardboard MREs. You boys work too hard," Maya replied with her practiced shy smile. "I figured you could use something that actually tastes good." The poker table was a who's who of FOB Kestrel's leadership. SFC Rodriguez from Alpha Company, Master Sergeant Williams from Logistics, First Sergeant Baker from Headquarters, and 3 others Maya recognized but hadn't interacted with much. And there, in the chair facing the door with a clear view of everyone coming and going, was Staff Sergeant Phillips. He looked up as she entered, and Maya felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. His expression was friendly enough, but his eyes were doing something else, entirely cataloging, analyzing, measuring threat levels. "Maya, great to see you. You want to join us? We could use some new blood in this game." It was Phillips who spoke, his voice carrying just the right note of casual invitation. But Maya's training read the subtext. He wanted her at the table where he could control the interaction, study her reactions, probe for weaknesses. "Oh, I don't really know how to play," she lied smoothly. In reality, she'd learned poker from her father, perfected it in Special Forces training, and used it for intelligence gathering in 3 different countries. "But I'll stay for a few minutes if you don't mind." "Course not." "Pull up a chair." Maya positioned herself where she could watch Phillips while appearing to focus on the game. The other players welcomed her with the easy camaraderie she'd come to appreciate. About these soldiers, they were genuinely glad to see her, genuinely grateful for the food and company. Phillips was a different story. As the cards were dealt, and the conversation flowed around topics ranging from sports to family news from home. Maya watched Phillips work. He was good at his job. She had to give him credit for that. His questions seemed casual, his interest in her responses natural, but she could see the intelligence-gathering methodology underneath. "So Maya, how are you holding up with all this spy business?" he asked during a lull in the card play. "Must be scary, thinking someone might be watching your every move." "It is," she replied honestly. "I keep wondering if I should have noticed something, you know. I mean, if someone's been using the kitchen to pass information, maybe I saw something and didn't realize it was important." Phillips's reaction was subtle but telling. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly, his attention sharpening in a way that reminded Maya of a predator focusing on potential prey. "What kind of thing do you think you might have seen?" "I don't know. Maybe one of the delivery drivers acting strange or asking weird questions." Maya kept her voice uncertain, worried. "The Green Berets asked me about it, but honestly, I don't pay that much attention to anyone who's not bringing me good ingredients." She watched Phillips process this information. If he was innocent, he'd probably offer reassurance or share his own concerns about base security. If he was guilty but cautious, he'd probe for more details while appearing supportive. Instead, he did something that made Maya's training alarm start screaming. He glanced quickly at Master Sergeant Williams, and Williams gave an almost imperceptible nod. Williams was part of it too. "I'm sure you've got nothing to worry about," Phillips said, his tone carefully reassuring. "But you know, if you do remember something that seemed odd, you might want to be careful about who you mention it to. Sometimes these investigations can get out of hand, and innocent people can get caught up in accusations." It was a warning, delivered with plausible deniability, but unmistakably clear in its intent. Keep quiet, or face consequences. Maya nodded, gratefully playing up her relief at his apparent concern. That's good advice. I'd hate to accidentally cause trouble for someone who doesn't deserve it. Exactly. Phillips smiled, but Maya could see calculation behind his eyes. You know, Maya, I've been thinking with all this security stuff going on, maybe you should have someone checking on you more regularly, making sure you're safe. The offer sounded protective, but Maya recognized it for what it was, an attempt to establish surveillance over her movements. Phillips wanted to monitor her, probably to determine whether she posed a threat to his operation. That's really sweet of you to offer, she said, but I don't want to be any trouble. No trouble at all. Matter of fact, I could swing by the mess hall tomorrow morning, help you with the breakfast prep. I used to work in restaurants back home. I know my way around a kitchen. Master Sergeant Williams leaned forward, folding his poker hand. That's a good idea, Phillips. Maya, you shouldn't be working alone with all this uncertainty. Security protocol says civilians should have military escort during elevated threat conditions anyway. Maya felt the net closing around her. Between Phillips and Williams, they were creating a legitimate-sounding justification for constant surveillance. If she refused, it would seem suspicious. If she accepted, she'd be under direct observation by people who might already suspect her true identity. Well, if it's really protocol, she said reluctantly. It is, Williams confirmed with authority. I'll make sure it's logged as official security procedure. The poker game continued, but Maya's mind was racing through contingencies. She now knew that at least 2 senior NCOs were compromised. They suspected her of being more than she appeared, and they were moving to contain her through seemingly protective surveillance. She needed to get word to the Green Berets immediately, but she also needed to maintain her cover long enough to identify the full extent of the spy network. If Phillips and Williams were working together, how many others were involved, and what was their ultimate objective? You know what, she said, standing up and gathering her empty casserole dish. I should probably head back. Early morning tomorrow. And if Sergeant Phillips is going to help with breakfast, I should make sure I have everything organized. Of course, Phillips said, also standing. Actually, let me walk you back. It's dark out there, and with everything that's been happening. Maya's pulse quickened, but she maintained her grateful smile. You're all so protective. I really appreciate it. The walk across the base was a master class in psychological warfare, disguised as friendly conversation. Phillips kept up a steady stream of casual questions about her family back home, her plans after the deployment, her thoughts on base security, while Maya deflected with the kind of mundane responses that revealed nothing while appearing completely open. But underneath the surface, both of them were engaged in a deadly serious game of intelligence gathering. Phillips was probing for weaknesses, inconsistencies, anything that might confirm his suspicions about her. Maya was cataloging his methods, his questions, his areas of interest, building a profile that might help her predict his next moves. They reached the mess hall without incident, but as Maya unlocked the door, Phillips made his most significant move yet. Maya, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What made you really come out here? I mean, a single woman, middle of a war zone, working for contractor wages that aren't exactly impressive. It doesn't add up to me. It was a direct challenge, delivered with enough friendly concern to maintain plausible deniability. Maya felt the weight of the moment. How she answered this question could determine whether her cover held or whether she'd have to break it to survive. Honestly, she said, injecting a note of embarrassment into her voice, I was running away from a really bad breakup. My ex-husband cleaned out our joint accounts and disappeared with his secretary. I needed money, I needed distance, and this job offered both. It was a common enough story. Plenty of contractors had similar motivations for deploying. and it had the advantage of being partially true. Maya's real marriage had ended badly, though not for the reasons she'd just described. Phillips studied her face with the intensity of someone trained to detect deception. That's rough. But most people running from relationship problems don't usually run this far. Most people don't have the skills to get jobs like this, Maya replied with a self-deprecating laugh. I can cook for large groups. I don't mind isolation. And I was desperate enough to sign up for a deployment that most people won't take. It seemed like a good fit. She could see Phillips weighing her words, looking for cracks in her story. After a long moment, he nodded. Well, I'm glad you ended. Up here, the food's certainly improved since you arrived. Thanks. I'll see you in the morning for breakfast prep. Wouldn't miss it. As Maya watched him walk away, she felt the full weight of her situation settling over her. She was now under active surveillance by a spy network that suspected her. True identity, she had no secure way to communicate with her handlers, and her mission 8 months of careful intelligence gathering on a high-value Taliban cell was hanging in the balance. She entered the mess hall and went through the motions of cleaning up and preparing for the next day, all while her mind worked through options. She could try to break cover and contact the Green Berets, but that would mean compromising her primary mission. She could maintain her cover and hope to outmaneuver Phillips and Williams, but that carried enormous risks. Or she could do what Delta Force had trained her to do, adapt, improvise, and turn a bad situation to her advantage. As she locked up the mess hall and headed to her quarters, Maya was already formulating a plan. If Phillips wanted to watch her, she'd give him something worth watching. And if Williams thought he could manipulate her through security protocols, he was about to learn just how dangerous it was to underestimate a woman they thought was just a cook. But first, she needed to survive tomorrow's breakfast service with Phillips looking over her shoulder, looking for any sign that she was more than she appeared. Maya Rodriguez, Delta Force operative, was about to give the performance of her life. Maya's alarm went off at 0430, just as it had every morning for 8 months. But as she rolled out of her narrow bunk and began her usual routine, everything felt different. The weight of being watched, of performing every gesture for an audience that was actively looking for signs of deception, made even simple tasks feel loaded with significance. She dressed in her standard kitchen whites, tied her hair back in the regulation food service style, and gathered her personal items with the same efficient movements she'd used since arriving at FOB Kestrel. But underneath the familiar routine, her mind was running through contingency plans and threat assessments with the systematic precision of her special operations training. The mess hall was still dark when she arrived, the pre-dawn quiet broken only by the distant hum of generators and the occasional radio check from the night watch. Maya went through her opening routine. Lights on, coffee started, inventory check, prep list review with mechanical efficiency, while her enhanced senses cataloged every sound and shadow outside. Phillips arrived exactly 15 minutes after she did, which told her he'd been watching from somewhere with a clear view of the mess hall entrance. Morning, Maya. Hope you don't mind me being a little early. Figured I could help with more of the setup. Not at all. I appreciate the help. But as Phillips entered her kitchen domain, Maya felt the violation of having hostile eyes in a space that had become genuinely hers. For 8 months, this had been her sanctuary, the place where she could almost forget she was living a lie. Now it felt like enemy territory. So what's the breakfast plan? Phillips asked, washing his hands with the thoroughness of someone who actually knew kitchen hygiene protocols. Standard fare: scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, biscuits. Nothing fancy for the early shift. Maya began pulling ingredients from the walk-in cooler, hyper-aware of Phillips's position behind her. You really did work in restaurants? Family business back in Michigan. Started washing dishes when I was 14. Worked my way up to line cook before I enlisted. He moved around the kitchen with genuine familiarity, finding equipment and organizing workspace with practiced efficiency. Funny how skills follow you, you know? Maya knew exactly what he meant, though not in the way he intended. Her knife skills, developed through years of professional cooking, had also been enhanced by combat training. That included several very different uses for sharp blades. As they worked together preparing breakfast for 200 soldiers, Maya found herself grudgingly impressed by Phillips's competence. He knew his way around commercial kitchen equipment. He understood food safety procedures, and he worked with the kind of efficient focus that made him genuinely helpful rather than a hindrance. It also made him much more dangerous. An incompetent spy might have blown his cover through obvious mistakes. Phillips was skilled enough to maintain his surveillance while actually contributing to the work, which meant Maya had to perform flawlessly while being studied by someone who might spot the small details that would reveal her true training. You handle that knife like a pro, Phillips observed as Maya broke down a case of vegetables with military precision. Most people hack away at onions. You've got real technique. It was a probe delivered casually while he focused on the bacon sizzling in front of him. Maya had to make a split-second decision about how to respond. YouTube University, she said with a self-deprecating laugh. I spent hours watching cooking videos when I first started taking it seriously. Amazing what you can learn online these days. It was a plausible explanation for skills that might otherwise seem inconsistent with her background, and it had the advantage of being partially true. She had studied online resources, though for very different purposes. YouTube, huh? What else have you learned from the internet? Another probe, this one more direct. Phillips was fishing for information about her other skills, her interests, anything that might not fit the profile of a civilian contractor cook. Little bit of everything, Maya replied, keeping her tone light and conversational. Basic car maintenance, some Spanish, how to fix kitchen equipment when it breaks down. You know how it is when you're on your own, you learn to be self-sufficient. She was threading a careful needle, acknowledging capabilities that would be natural for someone in her position while concealing the extent of her actual training. Phillips nodded thoughtfully, but she could see him filing away every detail for later analysis. The breakfast rush began at 06:00, and for the next 2 hours, Maya fell into the familiar rhythm of feeding soldiers. But having Phillips in her kitchen changed the dynamic in ways that went beyond simple surveillance. Several of the regular customers noticed him immediately. Phillips, what are you doing back here? Asked Sergeant Chun, looking puzzled as he went through the serving line. Security detail, Phillips replied smoothly. With all the investigation stuff going on, Command wants civilians to have military presence during their work hours. It was a plausible explanation that most soldiers accepted without question, but Maya noticed that some of the troops seemed less comfortable with Phillips's presence than they should have. A few even avoided making eye contact with him entirely, which suggested his reputation among the enlisted personnel wasn't entirely positive. More concerning was the subtle change in atmosphere. Conversations that normally flowed freely became more guarded when Phillips was within earshot. Soldiers who usually lingered to chat with Maya grabbed their food and left quickly. The easy camaraderie that had characterized mealtimes was replaced by a tension that everyone could feel but no one directly acknowledged. Maya filed these observations away while maintaining her cheerful demeanor and efficient service. If Phillips's presence was making the other soldiers uncomfortable, it suggested they might have instinctive concerns about him that they couldn't consciously articulate. Busy morning, Phillips commented as the breakfast rush wound down, and they began cleaning up. Always is. These boys work hard. They need the fuel. You really care about them, don't you? It was another probe, but this one touched on something genuinely emotional for Maya. Despite the lies and deception that defined her presence here, her concern for these soldiers was completely real. They're good kids, she said simply. Most of them are barely old enough to vote, and they're out here risking their lives every day. The least I can do is make sure they eat well. Phillips studied her expression with the intensity of someone trained to detect deception, but Maya knew he wouldn't find any falsehood there. Her cover identity might be a construct, but her feelings about the soldiers under her care were entirely genuine. That's refreshing, Phillips said after a moment. A lot of contractors are just here for the money. Money's nice, Maya admitted, but it's not enough by itself, not for this. She could see Phillips processing this information, trying to fit it into whatever profile he was building of her. A genuinely caring person was harder to manipulate than someone motivated purely by greed or desperation, which might complicate his plans for managing her. They finished the cleanup in relative silence, but Maya could feel Phillips's attention. Like a weight. Every movement, every decision, every casual gesture was being catalogued and analyzed for signs that she was more than she appeared. As the last pan was cleaned and the prep work for lunch was organized, Phillips made his next move. Maya, I was thinking, since we're going to be working together for security reasons, maybe we should get to know each other better. You want to grab coffee later? I could tell you some stories about this place, help you understand how things really work around here. It was phrased as a friendly invitation, but Maya recognized it for what it was, an interrogation session disguised as social interaction. Phillips wanted to get her away from the kitchen, away from her comfortable environment, where he could probe more aggressively for inconsistencies in her story. That sounds nice, she replied, projecting the kind of grateful acceptance any lonely contractor would show. I don't get much social interaction outside of work. Great. How about 1400 after lunch service? There's a quiet spot by the communications building where we won't be interrupted. The location choice was telling, near the communications building, where their conversation could potentially be monitored or recorded, and away from areas where other personnel might overhear. Phillips was setting up conditions that would give him maximum advantage. Sounds perfect. I'll look forward to it. As Phillips left the mess hall, Maya allowed herself a moment to appreciate the complexity of her situation. She was being surveilled by a spy who suspected her true identity. She was scheduled for an interrogation disguised as a social meeting, and she still had to maintain her cover while somehow getting intelligence to the Green Berets about the extent of the spy network. But she was also a Delta Force operative with 8 years of special operations experience and training, specifically designed for exactly this kind of situation. Phillips might think he was hunting a sheep, but he was actually stalking a wolf. Maya Rodriguez was about to remind him why underestimating your opponent was the first and often last mistake in the intelligence game. But first, she had lunch to serve, and 200 soldiers who were counting on her to do her job, regardless of whatever else was happening in the shadows of FOB Kestrel. The area behind the communications building was exactly what Maya had expected, secluded enough for private conversation, but positioned where their meeting could be observed or recorded by anyone with access to the building's security systems. Phillips had chosen his ground carefully. Maya arrived at exactly 1400, carrying 2 cups of coffee and projecting the nervous anticipation of someone grateful for unexpected social interaction. Phillips was already there, seated on a concrete barrier with a clear view of all approaches, and his back to a wall that would prevent anyone from overhearing their conversation. Right on time, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I like that in a person. Military precision, Maya replied with a self-deprecating laugh. I guess some of it rubs off when you're around soldiers all day. She handed him one of the coffee cups and settled onto the barrier beside him, close enough for intimate conversation, but far enough away to maintain appropriate social distance. The positioning also gave her a view of the same approaches Phillips was watching, which would allow her to spot any surveillance or backup he might have arranged. So, Phillips began, Tell me about your life before this place. What was Colorado like? It was a classic intelligence interview, opener, broad, friendly, designed to get the subject talking freely while the interrogator listened for inconsistencies or revealing details. Maya launched into her prepared background story, weaving together enough genuine details to make it feel authentic while avoiding anything that might contradict her cover identity. She talked about working in restaurants in Denver, her failed marriage, her decision to take the contractor position as a way to start over. Phillips listened with the focused attention of someone trained to extract information, asking follow-up questions that seemed casual but were clearly designed to test the consistency of her story. So your ex-husband was also in the restaurant business? No, he was in construction. That's actually how we met. His crew was doing renovation work at the restaurant where I was working. Maya had rehearsed this backstory hundreds of times, but having to deliver it under hostile interrogation made every detail feel loaded with significance. Must have been hard, losing both your marriage and your financial security at the same time. It was devastating, Maya said, injecting genuine emotion into her voice. I felt like such a fool for trusting him with the money. But you know what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Phillips nodded sympathetically, but Maya could see him cataloging every detail of her emotional responses. He was looking for signs of deception, but also for psychological leverage points that could be exploited later. What made you choose this particular job? I mean, there are contractor positions at safer bases, better pay, more amenities. It was a perceptive question, and one that any trained intelligence officer would ask. Maya's decision to take a position at a remote, dangerous FOB like Kestrel would seem odd for someone motivated purely by money or a desire to restart their life. Honestly? Maya said, looking embarrassed. The other positions required references from previous employers, background checks that would have revealed the financial mess my ex left me in. This job, they were desperate enough to hire someone with my skills without digging too deep into my recent history. It was a clever answer because it contained enough truth to be believable while explaining away any gaps or inconsistencies in her official background. Phillips seemed to accept it, but Maya could see him filing it away for later verification. You mentioned you learned a lot from the internet, Phillips continued. What else have you taught yourself? Another probe, this one more direct. Maya had to be careful not to reveal capabilities that would seem inconsistent with her cover identity. Basic repair work, mostly. When you're managing a kitchen on your own, you need to be able to fix equipment when it breaks down. I've learned enough electrical work to handle simple wiring issues, enough plumbing to deal with drainage problems, that sort of thing. Impressive. Most people can't even change a light bulb these days. My dad always said that self-reliance was the most important skill anyone could have. He taught me to figure things out for myself instead of depending on other people to solve my problems. Maya was drawing on genuine memories of her father, a career Air Force sergeant who'd indeed emphasized self-reliance. But she was carefully editing the specifics of what he'd taught her, which had included considerably more than basic home maintenance. Phillips shifted the conversation to her observations about base personnel, asking seemingly casual questions about who she'd interacted with, who seemed stressed or troubled, whether she'd noticed any unusual behavior. Actually, Maya said, as if the thought had just occurred to her, I have been worried about Private Knox. She seemed really anxious lately, and yesterday she asked me some strange questions about loyalty and doing the right thing. It was a calculated risk, but Maya needed to plant information that would make Phillips think Knox was becoming a problem that needed to be handled. If she could manipulate Phillips into making a move against Knox, it might expose more of his network. Phillips's reaction was subtle but telling, a slight tightening around his eyes, a momentary pause in his casual demeanor. What kind of questions? Hypothetical stuff about what you'd do if you knew someone was doing something wrong, but you couldn't prove it. She seemed really upset about something, but when I tried to get her to open up, she clammed up. Maya could see Phillips processing this information, weighing the implications. If Knox was indeed becoming a liability to his operation, he'd need to take action to neutralize the threat. Did she mention any specific names or situations? No, nothing specific. But she kept asking about trust and loyalty, and whether sometimes the right thing to do was the hardest thing to do. Maya shook her head with apparent concern. I'm probably reading too much into it, but with everything that's been happening lately. No, you're right to be concerned, Phillips said, his tone carrying a note of genuine worry that confirmed Maya's suspicions about Knox's danger. These investigations put a lot of stress on everyone, especially the younger soldiers. Maybe I should check in with her, make sure she's handling things okay. Maya nodded gratefully, while internally she was planning how to warn Knox that Phillips was now actively targeting her. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Phillips gradually shifting from intelligence gathering to what seemed like genuine attempts at building rapport. He shared stories about his own background, talked about his family back home, even made self-deprecating jokes about his military career. It was expertly done, the kind of relationship-building technique that could make a target forget they were being manipulated. But Maya recognized the methodology because she'd been trained in the same techniques. Phillips was trying to establish emotional connection that could be leveraged for future influence operations. This has been really nice, Maya said as their coffee cups emptied. I don't get much chance to just talk to people here. Everyone's always so busy with their duties. We should do this again, Phillips replied. Maybe I could cook dinner for you sometime. I make a mean spaghetti sauce. It was phrased as a friendly invitation, but Maya understood the subtext. Phillips wanted more opportunities to study her, more chances to probe for weaknesses or inconsistencies. The dinner invitation would also give him access to her personal quarters, where he could potentially plant surveillance devices or search for evidence of her true identity. I'd like that, she said with apparent pleasure. It would be nice to have someone else do the cooking for once. As they walked back toward the main base area, Maya felt the weight of everything she'd learned. Phillips was definitely part of a spy network. He was now actively concerned about Private Knox as a potential threat, and he was planning to escalate his surveillance of Maya herself. But she'd also gained valuable intelligence about his methods, his psychological profile, and his operational priorities. More importantly, she'd managed to direct his attention toward Knox in a way that might force him to make moves that would expose more of his network. The chess game was entering its middle phase, and Maya was no longer just defending her position. She was starting to attack. Thanks for the coffee and conversation, Phillips said as they reached the point where their paths diverged. I'll see you tomorrow morning for breakfast prep. Looking forward to it, Maya replied with genuine warmth. As she watched him walk away, Maya was already planning her next moves. She needed to warn Knox about the increased danger. She needed to get intelligence to the Green Berets about what she'd learned. And she needed to prepare for Phillips's dinner invitation and whatever surveillance or search it might entail. Maya Rodriguez, the cook, was looking forward to a quiet evening and an early bedtime. Maya Rodriguez, the Delta Force operative, was just getting started. Maya waited until 2,100 hours before making her move. By then, most of the base had settled into evening routines, soldiers writing emails home, catching up on sleep, or gathered in small groups playing cards or video games. It was the perfect time for seemingly casual encounters that wouldn't draw attention from surveillance. She found Private Knox in the communications building, pulling a late shift monitoring radio traffic. The young soldier looked exhausted and stressed, dark circles under her eyes testament to the strain of the past few days. Jenny, Maya knocked softly on the open doorframe. Sorry to bother you, but I brought you some leftover apple pie. Figured you might need a pick-me-up during the long watch. Knox's face lit up with genuine gratitude. Maya, you're a lifesaver. I've been living on vending machine junk for the past 2 days. Maya entered the communications center, noting the security cameras and recording equipment with her peripheral vision while maintaining focus on Knox. She needed to deliver a warning without saying anything that would implicate either of them. If the conversation was being monitored. How are you holding up with everything that's been going on? She asked, settling into a chair beside Knox's workstation. It's been ... Intense, Knox replied carefully. All the interviews, the security checks, everyone looking at each other suspiciously. It's hard to know who to trust anymore. Maya heard the double meaning in Knox's words. The young soldier was clearly thinking about their conversation in the supply warehouse and her suspicions about Phillips. I know what you mean, Maya said, cutting a generous slice of pie and handing it to Knox. Actually, I wanted to thank you for your advice yesterday about being careful who I talk to about my concerns. Knox looked up sharply, catching the emphasis Maya had placed on the word careful. I'm glad it was helpful, Knox said slowly. Sometimes it's better to observe situations carefully before acting on incomplete information. It was a coded warning Knox was telling Maya, that she suspected they might be under surveillance and that any action should be delayed until they had better intelligence. Absolutely, Maya agreed. Though I have to say, some people have been really supportive. Sergeant Phillips offered to help me with breakfast prep, and he suggested we should get to know each other better. We had coffee this afternoon, and he was asking about everyone's morale and stress levels. He seemed particularly concerned about you. Knox went very still, the fork halfway to her mouth. Maya had delivered the warning as subtly as possible, but Knox was smart enough to understand the implications. That's thoughtful of him, Knox said carefully. I should probably make sure I'm managing my stress better if people are noticing. Just remember, Maya said, keeping her voice gentle and supportive, there are people here who care about your well-being. If you ever need someone to talk to, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't hesitate to reach out. She was offering support, while also letting Knox know that she wasn't alone, that there were people who would help if the situation escalated. Knox nodded, understanding the subtext. I appreciate that. And Maya, the same goes for you. If you ever feel like things are getting complicated, you can count on me too. It was as close to an alliance as they could form under the circumstances. Both women now understood that they were potentially in danger, that they needed to watch out for each other, and that any communication would need to be extremely careful. Maya finished her visit with casual conversation about menu planning and supply schedules, giving Knox time to eat her pie and to anyone monitoring the conversation a perfectly innocent explanation for the meeting. But as she left the communications building, she felt the weight of escalating danger. Phillips was targeting Knox. Knox was aware of the threat, and Maya was caught in the middle of a situation that was spiraling toward violence. She needed to accelerate her intelligence gathering before someone got killed. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. As Maya walked back toward her quarters, she noticed unusual activity around the motor pool. Several vehicles were being prepared for movement, not unusual in itself, but the timing and secrecy suggested something beyond routine operations. More concerning was the presence of Master Sergeant Williams supervising the activity personally. Maya altered her route to pass closer to the motor pool, using the shadows and ambient noise to mask her approach. Her Delta Force training included extensive reconnaissance techniques, and she moved with the silent precision of someone who'd spent years gathering intelligence in hostile territory. What she observed made her blood run cold. Williams was briefing 3 soldiers Maya didn't recognize, men who wore no unit patches and carried themselves with the alert stillness of special operations personnel. But these weren't American special operators. Their equipment was wrong. Their weapons were variants she didn't recognize. And most tellingly, They were speaking in hushed tones in what sounded like foreign operatives on a U.S. military base, being briefed by a senior NCO who was supposed to be on their side. Maya memorized every detail she could observe: physical descriptions, equipment specifications, vehicle identifying numbers, conversation fragments. But she also realized she was witnessing something far more serious than simple intelligence leaks. This was active collaboration with enemy forces, and it was happening at the highest levels of base operations. One of the foreign operatives looked in her direction, and Maya froze, using her peripheral vision to track his movement while appearing to be casually walking toward the latrines. The man spoke quietly to Williams, who glanced toward Maya's position with obvious concern. Maya forced herself to maintain a casual pace while every instinct screamed at her to run. If they suspected she'd observed their meeting, she could be killed before she had a chance to report what she'd discovered. She reached the latrine building and using the time inside to think through her options. She could try to reach the green barracks immediately, but that would mean crossing the base in darkness while potentially being tracked by hostile operatives. She could wait until morning and try to communicate during normal activities, but that would give Williams and his collaborators time to act on whatever they were planning. Or she could do what her training had prepared her for: gather more intelligence while staying invisible. When Maya emerged from the latrines, the motor pool activity had dispersed. Williams was gone, the foreign operatives had disappeared, and only normal night watch personnel were visible. But Maya's enhanced hearing caught the sound of vehicles moving toward the base perimeter, multiple engines, moving without lights, heading toward areas where they could exit without passing through main checkpoints. The foreign operatives were leaving, which meant whatever they'd come to accomplish was finished, or they'd gathered the intelligence they needed. Maya made her way back to her quarters with careful attention to her surroundings, checking for surveillance or pursuit. Her small room was exactly as she'd left it, but she went through a complete security check anyway, looking for signs that it had been searched or that surveillance devices had been planted. Finding nothing obvious, she settled at her small desk and began documenting everything she'd observed, using a code system she'd developed for recording sensitive information in seemingly innocent journal entries. To anyone reading over her shoulder, it would look like personal observations about base life and homesick rambling about friends and family back home. In reality, she was creating a comprehensive intelligence report that detailed enemy operative infiltration of a U.S. military facility. As she wrote, Maya's mind was already working through the implications. If Williams was collaborating with foreign operatives, the entire security of FOB Kestrel was compromised. Every operation, every patrol route, every defensive position could be known to hostile forces. More immediately, her own mission was in serious jeopardy. The Taliban cell she'd been tracking for 8 months might have been aware of her activities all along. They might know exactly who she was and what she was trying to accomplish. Maya finished her coded report and hid it in the false bottom of her makeup case, a concealment technique that had served her well in previous deployments. Then she prepared for bed with the same routine she'd followed for 8 months, giving any surveillance the appearance of a normal evening. But as she lay in her narrow bunk, Maya's mind was racing through contingency plans. She was a Delta Force operative surrounded by enemies who might already know her true identity, cut off from her chain of command, with intelligence critical to national security and no secure way to transmit it. Tomorrow she would have to continue playing the role of the friendly cook while navigating a situation that was rapidly becoming a matter of life and death. Maya Rodriguez had been in worse situations, but not many, and never while having to maintain a cover identity that required her to appear helpless and innocent. The game was about to become much more dangerous. Maya's morning routine felt surreal against the backdrop of what she'd discovered the night before. As she prepared breakfast for soldiers who might be eating their last meal, if the intelligence she'd gathered was accurate. She had to maintain the cheerful demeanor that had become her trademark while internally preparing for potential combat operations. Phillips arrived precisely on schedule, and Maya found herself studying him with new eyes. Knowing that he was part of a network that included foreign operatives changed everything about their interaction. This wasn't just a spy trying to protect his information-gathering operation. This was active collaboration with enemy forces. Morning. Maya, you look tired. Everything okay? Just couldn't sleep, she replied honestly. I kept thinking about our conversation yesterday, about all the stress everyone's under. It made me worry about people. It was a perfect cover explanation for any signs of strain Phillips might notice, and it reinforced her image as someone whose concerns were purely personal rather than operational. You've got a good heart, Phillips said, but Maya caught the way his eyes were cataloging her appearance, looking for signs that she might have been active during the night. That's what makes you special around here. As they worked together preparing breakfast, Maya noticed that Phillips was more alert than usual, his attention constantly shifting between his tasks and monitoring the activity around the mess hall. Something had him on edge, and Maya suspected it was related to the foreign operatives she'd observed. You seem a little tense this morning, she commented while working on biscuit dough. Everything all right? Just tired. Had to pull some extra duty last night security stuff. Phillips's answer was casual, but it confirmed Maya's suspicions about his involvement in the previous night's activities. Well, I hope you get a chance to rest today. You've been so helpful, and I'd hate for you to wear yourself out on my account. Actually, I wanted to ask you about tonight. You still interested in that home-cooked dinner I mentioned? I picked up some ingredients yesterday, and I make a mean marinara sauce. The invitation felt different now that Maya knew the full extent of Phillips's activities. This wasn't just surveillance, this was potentially an attempt to neutralize a perceived threat under the cover of social interaction. That sounds wonderful, she replied with apparent enthusiasm. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. How about 1900 hours? I've got a small kitchenette in my quarters, nothing fancy, but it'll be nice to cook for someone who appreciates good food. Maya smiled warmly while her mind calculated angles of attack, defensive positions, and escape routes from the NCO quarters. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be nice to be on the receiving end of someone else's cooking for once. The breakfast service proceeded normally, but Maya noticed several subtle changes in the base's routine. There were more security patrols than usual. Certain personnel were absent from their normal posts, and the overall atmosphere carried a tension that suggested something significant was happening behind the scenes. Most concerning was the absence of Private Knox from her usual breakfast routine. The young soldier typically grabbed coffee and a quick meal before her shift, but Maya hadn't seen her since their conversation the previous evening. Phillips, Maya said during a lull in service. Have you seen Jenny Knox this morning? She usually comes by for coffee about this time. Phillips's reaction was carefully controlled, but Maya caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested Knox's absence wasn't coincidental. Now that you mention it, no. She might be pulling a different shift rotation. These investigations have everyone's schedules mixed up. It was a plausible explanation, but Maya's instincts were screaming warnings. Knox had been targeted because of her suspicions about Phillips, and now she was conveniently absent from normal activities. I should probably save her some of those blueberry muffins she likes, Maya said, testing Phillips's reaction. Maybe I'll drop them by the communications center later. That's thoughtful, but I wouldn't worry about it. Knox can grab something from the regular chow line when she gets hungry. Phillips was actively discouraging Maya from seeking out Knox, which confirmed her fears about the young soldier's safety. Maya needed to find Knox and confirm her status, but she also needed to avoid alerting Phillips to her concerns. The morning progressed with Maya maintaining her cheerful efficiency while internally preparing for the most dangerous evening of her deployment. By the time lunch service ended, she'd formulated a plan that would either expose the full extent of the spy network or get her killed in the attempt. At 1500 hours, Maya made her move. She approached the communications building carrying a plate of Knox's favorite muffins, projecting the kind of maternal concern that had become part of her cover identity. The soldier on duty at the entrance recognized her immediately. "Afternoon, Maya. Bringing treats again?" "Looking for Jenny Knox, actually. She missed breakfast and lunch, and I'm worried she's not taking care of herself." "Knox? She called in sick this morning. Food poisoning, I think. Probably be down for a day or two." Food poisoning. Maya felt ice forming in her stomach. It was a convenient explanation for someone who needed to be isolated or eliminated without raising immediate suspicions. "Oh no, that's terrible. Is she in the medical center?" "Far as I know, she's in her quarters." Dot gave her something for the nausea and told her to rest. Maya thanked the soldier and walked away, but her mind was racing through the implications. If Knox really had food poisoning, it was suspicious timing. If she didn't, then she was either being held somewhere or she was already dead. Maya needed to confirm Knox's status before her dinner with Phillips. But approaching the young soldiers' quarters directly would be too obvious. She needed a more subtle approach. The opportunity came during her afternoon break when she volunteered to help distribute mail, a task that would give her legitimate access to most areas of the base, including the enlisted quarters where Knox lived. Maya found Knox's room and knocked softly, carrying a small care package that would explain her presence to anyone observing. No answer. She tried again, calling out softly, "Jenny?" "It's Maya. I brought you some soup and crackers for your stomach." Still no response, using skills that definitely weren't part of her cover identity. Maya checked the door lock and found it had been tampered with. Professional work, but detectable to someone with the right training. The room was being secured from the outside, not the inside. Maya's blood went cold. Knox wasn't sick, she was being held prisoner. Or worse. Using her peripheral vision to check for surveillance, Maya made a decision that would either save Knox's life or blow her own cover irreparably. She produced a small tool from her medical kit and worked on the lock with the speed and precision of someone trained in covert entry techniques. The door opened silently, and Maya slipped inside. Knox was there, but she wasn't sick. She was tied to her desk chair with professional restraints, a gag preventing her from calling for help, and her eyes wide with terror and relief as she saw Maya enter. Maya moved quickly, checking the room for threats before approaching Knox. As she removed the gag, Knox gasped out a desperate whisper, "Maya, thank God. They're going to kill me. Phillips and Williams, they know I was going to talk to the investigators. They're planning something big tonight, and they can't let me." Maya whispered, working on Knox's restraints. "I know. We're going to get you out of here." But as Maya freed Knox's hands, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside, multiple people moving with the kind of coordination that suggested military training. Maya moved to the window, checking escape routes while Knox rubbed circulation back into her wrists. "There's no way out," Knox whispered. "They've got people watching all the exits. Maya, they know about you too. Phillips has been reporting to someone outside the base, someone who has your real background. They know you're not just a cook." Maya felt the last pieces of her cover identity crumbling around her. Her mission was blown. Knox was in immediate danger, and they were trapped in a room surrounded by hostile forces. The footsteps stopped outside Knox's door. Maya drew the concealed pistol she'd carried for 8 months but never expected to use and positioned herself behind the door. Knox found her own hiding position behind the overturned desk. When the door opened, Maya Rodriguez, the helpful cook who just wanted to feed people, was going to disappear forever. Maya Rodriguez, Delta Force operative, was about to remind everyone why she'd survived 8 years of the most dangerous missions her country could assign. The dinner invitation was going to be more explosive than Phillips had planned. The door exploded inward with the force of a breaching charge. Splinters of wood flying across the small room as 3 figures in tactical gear poured through the opening. Maya had a split second to register that they weren't wearing standard U.S. military equipment before her training took over completely. The first man through the door never saw the muzzle flash that ended his operational career. Maya's shot took him center mass with the precision of someone who'd been killing enemies of the state since before some of these soldiers had learned to shave. The second man got his weapon halfway up before Maya's second round punched through his throat, dropping him in a gurgle of blood and surprise. The third man was smarter, diving sideways and using his dead teammate's body for cover while trying to get a clean shot at Maya's position. He almost succeeded. Maya rolled behind Knox's footlocker as automatic weapons fire chewed chunks out of the concrete wall where she'd been standing. Knox screamed from her position behind the overturned desk, but the sound was lost in the thunderous noise of combat in a confined space. Contact! Contact! We have active shooting in Building C. Maya could hear radio chatter from the surviving attacker, but the voice was speaking in accented English that confirmed her suspicions about foreign operatives. Maya popped up long enough to put 2 rounds into the third man's position, driving him deeper into cover while she assessed the tactical situation. 3 hostiles down or suppressed, but she could hear boots running in the hallway, reinforcements responding to the gunfire. "Knox!" Maya shouted over the ringing in her ears. "Are you hit?" "No, I'm okay." Maya, "What the hell?" Explanations later. "Right now we need to move." Maya grabbed Knox's arm and hauled her toward the window, using the brief lull in firing to attempt an exit that would get them out of the kill zone. But as she reached for the window latch, bullets started punching through the glass from outside. Positions. They were surrounded. Maya pulled Knox back from the window and did a quick tactical assessment. They were trapped in a small room with limited cover, facing multiple hostiles with superior numbers and positioning. In her military career, she'd been in worse situations, but never while protecting a civilian and maintaining a blown cover. Identity. Time to change the rules. "Knox, I need you to listen very carefully," Maya said while reloading her pistol with movements so fluid they looked like muscle memory. "My name is actually Master Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, United States Army, Special Operations Command. I'm a Delta Force operative, and I've been under deep cover here for 8 months. Knox stared at her with the kind of shock that comes from having reality completely restructured in the middle of a firefight. "You single quotes you're military? Very military. And right now, we're in serious trouble." Maya checked her ammunition too. Magazines plus the partial in her weapon. Not nearly enough for a sustained engagement, but it would have to do. More boots in the hallway, and Maya could hear voices coordinating in what sounded like Dari mixed with English. Foreign operatives working with compromised American personnel. Exactly what she'd suspected, but hadn't been able to prove, until now. Maya made a decision that would either save their lives or guarantee their deaths. She triggered the emergency beacon hidden in her watch, a device that would send an encrypted distress signal to every Delta Force and Special Operations unit within 100 miles. "Maya," Knox whispered, "there's something else you need to know. Before they grabbed me, I managed to get a message to those Green Berets. I told them about Phillips and Williams, and I told them you were in danger." "When?" "About an hour ago. If they believed me, they might already be." Explosions erupted somewhere else on the base. The distinctive sound of breaching charges and flashbang grenades that meant someone was conducting coordinated assault operations. Maya smiled grimly. Knox's message had gotten through, and the Green Berets were taking direct action. But the explosions also meant their immediate situation was about to get much worse. The hostile forces would either retreat or escalate to prevent capture, and Maya and Knox were still trapped in a room that was rapidly becoming a tomb. "Knox, how well do you know the building layout?" "Pretty well. I've been here 6 months. Is there access to the roof? Maintenance ladder in the utility closet at the end of the hall, but Maya, that hallway is full of people trying to kill. US, I know. Maya checked her pistol one more time, then looked Knox in the eyes with the kind of intensity that had motivated soldiers through impossible missions. Here's what we're going to do. When I say go, you're going to run for that utility closet like your life depends on it, because it does. Don't look back, don't hesitate, don't try to help me. Just run and get to the roof. What about you? I'm going to provide cover and distraction. And Knox, when you get to the roof, find the highest point and wave anything white you can find. The cavalry is coming, but they need to know where we are. Knox nodded with the kind of determined terror that Maya had seen in soldiers facing their first real combat. Ready? No. Good, nobody ever is, go. Maya kicked open Knox's door and stepped into the hallway with her pistol extended, immediately. Acquiring targets with the fluid precision of someone trained in close-quarters combat, the hallway was a shooting gallery, 6 hostiles in tactical positions, weapons trained on Knox's door, expecting to contain rather than assault their targets. They weren't prepared for a Delta force. Operative going on the offensive. Maya's first shot took down the lead man before he could react to her sudden appearance. Her second and third shots drove 2 more hostiles into cover while Knox sprinted past her toward the utility closet. Return fire filled the air with the deadly buzz of high-velocity rounds, but Maya was already moving. Using doorways and corners with the kind of tactical awareness that had kept her alive through 8 years of special operations, that she reached the utility closet, just as Knox disappeared up the maintenance ladder, pausing long enough to put 2 more rounds down the hallway before following her up the narrow shaft. The roof of Building C offered a tactical overview of FOB Kestrel that immediately confirmed Maya's worst fears. The base was under full assault by a mixed force of foreign operatives and compromised American personnel. Fires were burning in 3 locations. The communications building was partially destroyed, and she could see muzzle flashes from defensive positions that suggested organized resistance was collapsing, but she could also see the distinctive rotor profile of military helicopters approaching from the south. The cavalry Knox had summoned, arriving in the form of what looked like a full special operations response team. Maya, Knox was waving a white undershirt from the highest point of the roof. Are those the good guys? Maya's original assignment was relatively straightforward: infiltrate FOB Kestrel as kitchen staff while conducting surveillance on a Taliban intelligence cell operating in the region. For 8 months, she successfully maintained her cover as a harmless cook, serving meals and gathering information while appearing completely innocuous to the base personnel. Her cover was so effective that she became a trusted figure to soldiers and officers alike, including Base Commander Captain Morrison. However, Maya's routine intelligence operation becomes complicated when she encounters Private Knox, a young soldier who approaches her with disturbing suspicions about fellow personnel. Knox has noticed irregularities in the behavior of Staff Sergeant Phillips and Corporal Williams, suspecting they might be involved in activities that could compromise base security. Maya's situation deteriorates rapidly when Knox disappears, apparently taken by the very people she had been investigating. What began as a secondary concern about potential security breaches suddenly becomes Maya's primary focus when she realizes Knox's life is in immediate danger. The investigation reveals that Phillips and Williams are indeed part of a much larger and more dangerous operation than initially suspected. The spy network Maya uncovers extends far beyond simple information gathering. Her analysis reveals a sophisticated operation involving foreign operatives, compromised American personnel, and systematic intelligence leaks that have been used to coordinate attacks against U.S. forces throughout the region. The scope is staggering. Over the past 6 months, information leaked from FOB Kestrel has resulted in at least 12 successful attacks on American forces. The story reaches its first major Climax when Maya is forced to abandon her cover to rescue Knox from captivity. In an intense sequence of tactical combat, she fights her way through multiple hostile operatives while protecting the civilian she's sworn to save. The action culminates in a dramatic rooftop confrontation where Maya must hold off pursuing enemies while waiting for Delta Force extraction helicopters to arrive. During this crisis, Maya demonstrates the tactical skills and decision-making ability that made her reputation in special operations. Her willingness to expose herself to enemy fire while methodically eliminating threats showcases both her combat expertise and her commitment to protecting Knox at any cost. Following Knox's successful extraction, Maya receives new orders that fundamentally change her mission parameters. Rather than being recalled due to her blown cover, she's asked to continue the operation with a completely different approach. Her superiors want her to use her exposed status as a Delta Force operative to hunt down the remaining spy network members. The revelation that Knox provided during her rescue proves crucial. The network is coordinated by someone called the Colonel, a senior military officer with access to classified information who plans to visit Phillips Kestrel personally. This information transforms Maya's mission from intelligence gathering to active counterintelligence operations with potentially career-ending stakes. Maya's new identity as Major Rodriguez, a military intelligence specialist, gives her unprecedented authority to investigate the spy network. However, it also makes her a high-priority target for elimination. The network knows her real identity, understands her capabilities, and recognizes the existential threat she represents to their operations. Operating from a fortified command center, Maya begins systematically analyzing the network structure and identifying remaining compromised personnel. Her investigation reveals the sophisticated nature of the operation military-grade encrypted communications, hierarchical command structures, and coordination that has cost American lives across multiple provinces. The story builds toward climactic confrontation when Maya intercepts communications revealing that the spy network is planning to eliminate her before their commanding officer arrives. The intercepted message identifies Colonel as the network's leader who will arrive at 0600 hours the following day to either extract remaining assets or eliminate witnesses. Maya's tactical situation becomes even more precarious when she discovers that the communications planning her assassination originated from the base commander's office. This revelation means either Captain Morrison is part of the spy network, or someone with access to his secured communications equipment is operating without his knowledge. Rather than flee or request immediate extraction, Maya chooses to use the Colonel's planned visit as an opportunity to expose and neutralize the entire network. Using her 8 months of gathered intelligence and her Delta Force tactical training, she begins setting elaborate traps designed to document the network's full scope while protecting herself from assassination attempts. The story ends with Maya positioned in the communications center as Colonel James Harrison's helicopter approaches Phillips Kestrel. She has transformed from a passive intelligence gatherer into an active hunter, using the full resources of a military installation to investigate and combat a spy network that has been operating under everyone's noses for months. Themes and character development. The narrative explores themes of identity, deception, and the moral complexities of undercover operations. Maya's transformation from harmless cook to deadly operative illustrates the psychological demands of deep cover work and the personal costs of maintaining false identities for extended periods. The story also examines institutional betrayal and the devastating impact of security breaches on military operations. Maya's discovery that her 8-month secondary investigation into minor security concerns has revealed a network responsible for American casualties adds personal stakes to her professional mission. Maya Rodriguez emerges as a complex protagonist who combines tactical expertise with genuine concern for the soldiers she's sworn to protect. Her willingness to risk everything to save Knox demonstrates her moral compass. While her strategic approach to hunting the spy network showcases her professional competence and personal determination for justice. The Black Hawk touched down exactly at 0600, and Maya watched through her scope as Colonel James Harrison stepped onto the tarmac. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled every piece on the board. He was wrong. "Mongoose to all units," Maya whispered into her radio. "Jackrobot is on the ground. Execute Phase 3. Across the base, her carefully positioned Delta Force teammates emerged from concealment. The Green Berets, who had supposedly been investigating the spy network, were actually her own unit, deployed weeks earlier after her initial intelligence. Reports had reached the right people. Harrison made it exactly 50 meters before finding himself surrounded by the most lethal soldiers on Earth. As Maya approached the detention area, Phillips, now zip-tied and looking considerably less confident, stared at her in disbelief. "You played us from the beginning," he said. "Not from the beginning," Maya replied, removing her chef's apron for the last time. "I really was just supposed to be a cook. But you made it personal when you threatened my soldiers." The final tally was devastating. A 12-person spy network that had been feeding intelligence to Taliban forces for over a year, resulting in 18 American casualties. Harrison had been selling information for nearly $2 million, funding a comfortable retirement that would never come. Private Knox, now safely debriefed and reassigned, had earned a commendation for her courage in exposing the network. As for Maya, she was already preparing for her next assignment, another kitchen, another cover identity, another chance to serve her country from the shadows. After all, the best operators were the ones nobody ever suspected. If you enjoyed this epic tale of espionage and heroism, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support helps us create more incredible full-length stories like this one. What other covert operations would you like to explore? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to share this story with fellow thriller enthusiasts. Until next time, stay vigilant,